Vice President Kamala Harris will give her first interview Thursday. It's been a point of contention that she's not given any interviews since she became the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. There's been a lot of navel-gazing from mainstream media as to who would score the first interview with Kamala. The winner is CNN's Dana Bash. Harris will not fly solo, however. Her running mate, Tim Walz, will be part of that interview, which prompted Fox News' Laura Ingraham to post on X, quote, "Pre-taped live is just too risky. Joint interview." They're afraid of sending her out solo. CNN's Dana Bash will be doing the questioning. This keeps getting worse. And Fox News anchor Howard Kurtz posted, quote, "This puts so much pressure on this one sit-down, handing the Republicans a prime talking point, and doing more interviews would make each one less of a major dramatic event." It's a good point. CNN GOP pundit Scott Jennings posted, quote, "Weak sauce for Kamala Harris to demand an emotional support animal," I guess that's Tim Walz, "for her first interview, shows an extreme lack of confidence for Thursday night event on CNN."
The sit-down comes over a month since she's entered the race. According to a report in Politico, reporter Eugene Daniels writes that prior to deciding, Harris's campaign had been shopping around for who would be doing the big interview. Per his report, campaign staff asked reporters input too. Intelligencers Jonathan Chait does not believe one interview will be enough to wipe away the narrative that she's afraid of the big bad mainstream media. In his latest piece for New York Magazine, he writes that instead of avoiding interviews, she should just do as many as possible. He writes, quote, "Getting Harris out into the news several times a week is actually a much safer strategy. If she gives a bad answer, there will be a news cycle about it, but she will be back in the news a day or two later talking about something else." I just think that the right in America would be saying, if Kamala Harris wasn't spending her time campaigning in swing states, why is she so obsessed with the mainstream media who loves her so much? It's so much easier than if she was out talking to regular people. They would spin whatever decision she made into a bad one with a different narrative. And I think they want as many interviews as possible because they want the viewership that is the same excitement that draws huge crowds for her. So I just find all of this terribly silly. I think it's just people in media who think this is a big deal. When I talk to my family who lives in a swing state, when I talk to my friends who are regular working class voters, they could not care less whether or not she sits down with a mainstream media figure or with who.
I don't know, Jessica. I think this is kind of an exceptional situation because she did not actually have to run or campaign for the nomination. There were no debates. There was no primary process involving her. She was simply chosen to be the replacement candidate by Democratic elites and donors. And thus, I think, uniquely in this case, the American people might not feel like they actually know her, what her policies are. She is backtracked on a lot of them. She's flip-flopped on the border wall, some of her progressive environmental stances, whether she thinks there should be an electric vehicle mandate. That was something that our co-host Amber, I saw reported yesterday that she had originally supported a mandate that we all have to have electric vehicles by, I think, like 2040, and now she's just walked that back. She's changing her policies ostensibly, but she's not explaining it. She's not having to rationalize it because she's not ever in a position to get even polite scrutiny from a mainstream media that will no doubt be polite in their discussions with her because they like and support her and want her to win. Dana Bash did a good job in the Biden Trump debate, so fair enough. I think she'll be not insanely hostile by any stretch of the imagination to Kamala, but she might, ask her some probing questions that force Kamala to think on her feet, and that is what Harris has struggled with in the past, ending up saying those kind of vague platitudes. She'll have Tim Walz next to her to be able to step in, give some of that fiery combativeness he's known for. I do think she should do a lot more interviews, and there would be less writing on each one if she was talking to the press a lot. No, it should not take the place of campaigning in the swing states. Obviously, that's more important. But this is a situation where we did not have the opportunity to have the usual scrutiny you have for the candidate, for the person who becomes the nominee for president, because the process was done entirely on the fly this year.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see it as big of a deal. I see her answering questions outside of her rallies. I think that they could have press outside of the rallies asking whatever tough questions they have for her. I just think doing a sit down interview and the amount of attention this has had is unparalleled in media. What other president has received this amount of scrutiny demanding a long sit down interview? I just think it's very silly and a bit ridiculous,
But
and regular
because this is
people
an
don't
exceptional
care about stuff like
circumstance,
this. This is
Jessica. It
stuff
is
media
unusual.
people and the elites in Washington care about, but I don't think it's something that regular voters care about. I mean, they're hearing her message, they're hearing her policies, and it just feels out of touch that this has become as big of a deal as it is, especially when you have so many interviews happening with her on the tarmac outside of her rallies that get next to no coverage. Why? Because they're inconvenient for this narrative that she never talks to the media, which they're pushing as a ploy to get her to come on their show more often because they want the views. They want to make money during an election cycle. And it's just not as necessary as they're making it out to be. But here we go. She's sitting down with Dana Bash, who did a great job during the debate between Trump and Biden most recently. I think she's a fine pick for the job for that reason. And Walz coming, I don't think is a big deal. People need to get to know Walz too. He's done a lot of sit down interviews at times when she's been busy, because let's also remember she's serving as vice president. So the two of them showing up together is so they can get to know the ticket. This idea that it's emotional support is silly.
If she's too busy because she's doing the work of being vice president, that's fine. That's interesting. I would like to know what that work entails. I think it's thus fair to consider her part of the Biden-Harris administration. I know you got on me for that the other day. I had to laugh, by the way, at this Politico headline from, I think, from yesterday that was Vance tries to tether Harris to Biden during Michigan rally. Tries to tether Harris to Biden. She works for him. She's in the administration with him. If she doesn't co-sign the policies of the last 4 years, then she should explain where she differs. But she is part of the team who's responsible for implementing these policies. She was tangentially in charge of aspects, she was put philosophically in charge of aspects of the border policy, which is the single most unpopular aspect of the entire administration. That was her purview. So it's just, I feel like I'm being gaslit by a media trying to pretend, oh, she has nothing to, she's the change candidate. She has nothing to do with the administration. She's part of it. She's part of the administration. And some of these questions could be ironed out if she faced hostile scrutiny from the media. So no, I don't agree. I think this is an exceptional situation where she has been suddenly thrust into the position of being the presidential candidate without any of the normal scrutiny you get by doing this process. And she should do more interviews, not just what she should do with CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, and Rising, by the way, make a little pitch for our show, or News Nation, The Hill, etc. She should make herself available. Yes, they want to make money and they want their ratings, and that's their motivation, fine. But this is a situation where this is an unprecedented situation, and I think it is totally fine. To the extent the media is even criticizing her for not talking to them, there's not that much of that going on. Mostly, they're just giving her favorable coverage. They're making or pretending that she has nothing to do with the Biden administration, even though, again, she's part of it. I think that's led her to conclude, well, why would I bother talking to them? They're so in my corner. They're going to boost me without me even having to work for it. I think that's been the strategy thus far, although that is going to change if she totally ices them out.
I think JD Vance's predecessor would have a lot to say about the relationship between a vice president and a president, because Mike Pence and Donald Trump have everything in common, right? Especially the major stuff, especially the stuff about elections, considering he was his running mate. I think the Republicans know more than anybody in American politics that there is a difference between a vice president and a president. They can view the country differently. They can even view the Constitution very differently, and elections where their name is on the ticket very differently. So, yes, they are trying to make Harris own every single one of Biden's decisions, when, let's be honest, every single one of the president's decisions are not ones that the vice president endorses.
More Rising right after this.